If you're an uncommitted junior or senior looking to take their exit velocity to the next level, the Triphasic Blueprint is the only way to add 15 EV in the next 3 to 6 months. You're gonna wanna watch this full video. But first, what is the problem with your current training? Well, ChatGPT, Instagram Reels, and bodybuilding workouts severely mess these categories up. First is specificity. They are simply not specific for you. Next is progression. They don't progress over time based on any concept. Then stimulus. Your goals specifically require a certain way of training. And finally is periodization. Your programming has to adapt over time to your schedule, fatigue, and season. But why does all of that matter? Simply because all D1 players train this way at the next level. Simply, if you want to be like them, you have to train like them. And when you don't include these factors in your training, you are leaving gains on the table. After all, there is a reason D1 players are more physically developed than you right now. Which makes sense, but what makes the Triphasic approach the answer? This is the founder of the Triphasic training approach, Cal Dietz. As you can see, he's got a lot of accolades under his belt. And there are many high-level MLB athletes who also train under the Triphasic training approach. You've probably heard of Bo Bichette, and I'm sure you've heard of Tommy White and Max Clark. All of these guys follow the Triphasic training approach protocol. So if you need the proof, there it is. Well, where do I come in? I'm a current college strength conditioning coach at Anderson University who has coached 100 plus athletes both in person and online. But before I ever did that, I was a high school player who had no structure behind his training. Bodybuilding workouts, I used ChatGPT, and I saved Instagram Reels for my development. And I quickly realized that this was getting me nowhere after my metrics simply didn't move. So I had to get to work. On top of graduating with an exercise science degree, I studied my ass off for my athletes to deliver the best programming possible for their development, which ultimately led me to the Triphasic training approach and led my athletes to results like this. Liam here has gained 9 EV in just 7 weeks. Dan dropped off half a second on his 40-yard dash in just 5 weeks. Jace has gained 15 EV in 5 months. Julian gained 8 EV in just 3.5 weeks. And Ryan also gained 10 EV in 4.5 months. This was all in due part of the Triphasic training approach. So now you know that it works, and it's the best way to gain exit velocity, dropping your 60 time, and becoming the most dominant version of yourself on the field. But what even is the Triphasic training approach? Well, first, we need to zoom into individual movements because it starts there. Think of all your movements in the gym. Your squat, bench, deadlift, realistically, just about any movement. They can be broken down into 3 separate phases of movement. First is your concentric, which is shortening the muscle. Then your eccentric, which is lengthening the muscle. And then your isometric pattern, which has no movement involved. Here's a diagram of a basic bicep curl to give you an idea. The bicep is shortening in the concentric, the bicep is lengthening in the eccentric, and for the isometric, there's no movement. He's holding that dumbbell straight out. But the point is, these movement patterns aren't only for movement in the weight room. It's actually very similar to your baseball swing. Your load phase is the eccentric, as you are getting into a stretched position. Your max load, or waiting on the ball, is your isometric, as you've completed your lengthening process and getting ready to shorten the muscles when you explode towards the baseball. And then finally, your launch phase is the concentric. Point being, you have to build each phase individually so they're all equally as strong in your swing. But how do we do so? We focus on one at a time, and then we put them all together at the end. And here's what that looks like across 4 months of training. Month 1 is your eccentric focus. You primarily work on force absorption, tendon strength, muscle growth, and loading capacity here. Month 2 is your isometric focus. Again, tendon strength, but your transition speed, which is going from eccentric to concentric, gets a major focus here. Your deep range strength and stability are also key factors. Month 3 is your concentric focus. This is where you build explosiveness, central nervous system efficiency, and learn how to actually express the strength that you've built in the last 2 months. Month 4, we put them all together and simulate games as much as possible. We turn up the competition, we focus on max power, and a lot of sprint work as well. Which all makes sense, but the real key here is tempo. See, tempo is the easiest way to deliver each phase. All you have to do is allocate more time in your movement during each phase of your exercise. This is how tempo is expressed. So think of each number inside the parentheses here as your eccentric, isometric, and concentric number respectively. So each number refers to the amount of seconds allocated during that movement. This means you are spending 4 seconds during the eccentric of your lift, which means 4 seconds during the lengthening portion of your exercise. For the bicep, for example, that would be the down phase. And tempo work should always fall between 3 to 5 seconds and apply to 90% of the exercises per workout. Here's an example day of an eccentrically focused workout. As you can see here, we utilize this tempo work throughout the whole thing. and it's heavily overloaded on the eccentric number. Here's an example of an eccentric pull-up. Now month 2, we do the same thing, but we move it along to the next number. Again, each number refers to the eccentric, isometric, and concentric number. Here is a 4-second isometric. That means 4 seconds on the pause. Here's an example of an isometric squat. You'll notice here that he pauses 4 seconds at the very bottom of the lift, but the up and down phase are both as quick as possible. Here's an example day of an isometric base lift. Again, heavily overloaded within that isometric tempo. And of course, month 3 is going to focus on the concentric portion of your exercise. X means as fast as possible. So typically when we go into the concentric phase, we want to make sure we're moving as quickly as we possibly can. Here is an example of moving concentrically within an exercise. On the example day, we mainly focus on ballistics and plyometrics. Ballistics meaning a med ball toss, and your plyometrics being your jumps. The reason why we focus on those is because you simply can't really jump if your concentric isn't fast. So that forces that adaptation to happen. Same thing with the med ball toss. But for the concentric phase, it's very important to move as fast as possible with as much intent as possible as well. And finally, for the peak phase, this is month 4. Here we turn things into much more game specific. Still keeping up with the plyometrics and the ballistics, but here more game simulated patterns such as punch, row, and rotate. It's also important that we compete with our partners. So what I programmed for my guys for the triple broad jump, we compete for distance. Again, we're moving with max intent. This should be as close to your in season as possible. But if you're thinking about just copying these example days and repeating them over and over, you're missing the whole point of this video. While the triphasic training plan is a crucial element in building physicality, without your specific deficiencies, schedule, fatigue, and goals in mind, remember all these elements are still missing. That's because you can simply take, whether it's free training PDFs, Instagram workouts, ChatGPT, but none of them take you into account, which is the biggest variable in your entire training. And you may be thinking, I tell ChatGPT what I need to work on and my deficiencies, except you have no idea what you're looking at because you can't see what you can't see. And an expert's eyes are the only solution. You don't use ChatGPT for swing analysis, you go to a hitting coach. Why go to an expert for that and not your physical development? That actually matters more because the real game changer here is structure. And the truth is, every single D1 player had and has elite structure around their training specific to them. No exceptions. And again, if you want to be like them, you have to train like them. Or you can keep spinning your wheels and underperform within the biggest dream of your life, college baseball, just like I did. And that's why I created the Close the Gap protocol. And our first pillar is what I call prime development. This uses the triphasic training approach over a 6-month span that covers all of these elements, all specific to you and scientifically proven baseball training methods and nutritional plans inside the Kelly Training app. This is how we develop bigger, stronger athletes, and this is what shows up in your metrics. Here, Jack gained 9 miles an hour of EV in just 2 months. Dan gained 8 miles an hour of EV and dropped a half a second on his 40-yard dash. But we have to make sure that these gains actually show up within your physical mechanics themselves. And that's where our second pillar, Major League Launch, comes in, because we have to make sure that these gains translate into your swing. If your swing is weak and doesn't launch correctly, then none of this even matters. We do this through mechanical video analysis and drill work progression specific to your swing only. This is the exact pillar that got Julian from 93 to 101 EV in 3.5 weeks. Major League Launch is what separates you from the thousands of other players who are guessing within their mechanics or think that 1 hour per week with a hitting coach is enough, because that hitting coach does not tie your physicality into your swing. Which is great and all, and if you can do this during practice and within your cage work, that's awesome. But if you can't figure out how to actually make that work for you in games, then again, really it's all useless. And that's where our third pillar, the standard separator, comes in. You have to be able to mentally transfer this physical work into the game when shit gets tough. And this requires a system just like your triphasic training. And I want to introduce you to our mental performance coach, Coach Rost. Coach Rost has put in an immense amount of work within the Close the Gap protocol. And he is the reason Liam went from absolutely no confidence to literally manifesting one of the best seasons in school history. This is not by accident, and this is definitely not by luck. This is through a system. Within the community, we have weekly group calls where players in the program learn from others' perspectives, stories, and insights. And over and above all is one of the best ways to improve your mental game. And on top of all this is our school community. And again, the only way you'll improve your mental game is if you have a system specifically built for you, which is why we've built the standard separator inside our school website. where every athlete has access to 12 unique mental training modules, all with take-home and applicable assignments specific to you and your journey. And of course, with 24/7 text communication and one-on-one calls with Coach Rost, who has 4 years of college baseball experience at Huntington University and Wisconsin Whitewater, and has a mental performance mastery certification from Brian Cain. And I just want to preface this that the Close the Gap protocol works time and time again. And simply, you are no different than these guys who have gotten results inside. All you have to do is take action and get what you really want out of this game. If you're an uncommitted junior or senior looking to take your development to the next level, you can book a call with me in the description for the Close the Gap protocol below and see if you're a good fit. Remember, stand out and don't settle.